Carl and I were in San Diego last week working with just an incredibly talented team of key account managers over multi-million dollar global accounts. And one of the techniques that we're talking about using what we call the phrase that frames, which is a phrase that starts something like, in working with other companies like you, one of the things we've been surprised to learn is, and we're exploring the different dimensions of the phrase that frames, whether it be social proof or prompting and bounding or emotional connection, empathy, a learning posture, humility. There's all sorts of incredibly powerful sort of dimensions of the phrase that frames that as you unpack it, you begin to appreciate, wow, and it's not just what you say, but how you say it that really matters, particularly when you're solving for customers' self-confidence and not just their supplier confidence. But as we were going through these exercises and sort of more broadly going through the workshops, something really actually very interesting happened that was one of these moments, this aha light bulb moment where you kind of knew it was to be true, but you hadn't fully appreciated just the breadth, the scope, the power of something like a language, and particularly the phrase that frames in working with clients. Because one of the things that we found is that the sellers, even these incredibly talented sellers, would sort of continually gravitate towards a posture of questions and all in with very good intentions of trying to help customers out, help them navigate their decision complexity, help them figure out which questions matter most, help them determine which stakeholders need to be involved, help them figure out or help them, establish confidence around the implementation process. And all these different dimensions we're exploring across these processes where customer confidence can flag. And what we found is that there's this natural inclination to do in those situations the same thing that many of us often do in discovery conversations, which is simply ask open-ended questions. I once with my co-author from the Challenger Sale, Matt Dixon, we wrote a blog post for the Harvard Business Review many years ago titled "The Single Worst Question You Can Ask in Sales." It was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, somewhat quite serious. And the question was, the single worst question you can ask in sales is, what's keeping you up at night, right? It's an open-ended question that demonstrates you haven't done really any homework, that you don't really have anything to add to the table. You have no value to provide other. You're there to extract information and insight rather than to provide it. Okay, well, put those two things together and you get this really interesting lesson, which is that same idea around, rather than leading with an open-ended question and discovery, you can lead with a hypothesis, which leads us back to the phrase that frames. And working with other customers like you, one of the things we find is a higher priority for them given today's context is X. Is that something you're seeing too? And you can demonstrate, you can provide value based on social proof, what other companies are doing. You can provide a perspective, a framing for the conversation that's helpful so they can organize and analyze and prioritize their thinking. All that works in discovery. But the thing that really came back to us in this workshop last week is all of that applies in every other place or every other dimension of selling and buying. All those conversations we have across a multi-month pipeline. I wrote down a number of questions that we ask customers all the time with the best of intentions. Like, who should, as we think about sort of engaging with you across this journey, are there other people in your organization who should be involved? Or what other steps, as we move forward with this deal, what are the specific steps across your organization that you need to kind of work through? And are there any in particular that make you especially nervous or things where we can, provide some help? Do you have any concerns around implementation, whether it be users or uptake or whatever it might be? What kinds of results is your CEO really expecting from this? Are there specific metrics that she cares about most in determining whether this solution was a success? Yeah, or just more broadly, things like, as we go through this journey, what do you need from me? How can I help? I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make sure this is as easy as possible for you. I know there's a long list, but you stop thinking about that. I could make that list 3 times longer, maybe 4 times longer. All these questions are questions we ask all the time in sales with the best of intentions of trying to be helpful, trying to understand what that journey looks like for a customer. And every one of those is an opportunity not just to extract information, but to provide it, not just to extract help or insight, but to provide it using the phrase that frames. Who else should be involved? And working with other companies like you who've gone on a similar journey, one of the things we found is there's 3 people that often need to get involved, 2 of which are pretty clear, but one often gets overlooked. So I've prompted and bounded. I've bounded from many to 3, and I've prompted you to think of one that you may not have thought of otherwise. And I've based all of that prompting and bounding not on my personal experience and expertise, but based on social proof, the practical lived experience of what they want to know more than anything else, which is what other companies like them are doing. I won't do it to become a 15-minute video, but one could go through this list of questions I just gave you. In fact, if you go back and re-listen to that list of questions I just rattled through real quick and begin to apply the phrase that frames to each and every one of them, you begin to realize, wow, I can actually ask questions in a way that actually provides help and not just extracts help, as it were, right? Do you have any concerns around implementation? And working with other customers like you, we find there's probably 3 questions that come up most often around implementation, and one is especially important. So in other words, I can provide some help and some guidance. At the very least, I can demonstrate that I get them. I understand them. This is a really powerful moment of frame making where what you're really trying to do is create this moment where a customer looks you in the eye and kind of thinks to themselves, you get me. You totally understand what this feels like, and it feels hard. And that's how we put ourselves in a position to actually providing help and helping customers feel more confident, is not just by asking lots of very well-intended, open-ended questions like, what can I do to help? Because if I don't have an answer, if I don't know how you can help, then I don't know how you can help. I'm not even sure what I need to do. And then all of a sudden you just became irrelevant to me. I'll come back to you once I figure that out. And that's a bad place to be, right? As opposed to, let me talk to him or her, because every time I talk to them, they give me an idea of what I can do. As opposed to every time I talk to him or her, they are really generously offering help that I don't know how to ask for. And it's a very different way to think about how you engage with your clients, even when you have the best of intentions, is lead with a hypothesis, lead with the phrase that frames across all the dimensions of a purchase process, and provide perspectives from other companies like them, the lessons learned, and then use that as a way to frame the conversation as opposed to just extract information. I think you can find it's a really powerful tool. And as we work through these workshops, we found huge light bulb moments again and again and again with participants. Like, I can do it there. Ooh, I can do this here. I can take the phrase frames and put it here. And that's exactly what we're trying to teach in this first of our many workshops around framing, is that the idea that you can engage with framing in a very powerful way, specifically designed to solve for customers' self-confidence and not just their impression of you.